The popular view of life in ancient Egypt is often that it was a death-obsessed culture, in which powerful pharaohs forced the people to labor at constructing pyramids and temples. But in reality, ancient Egyptians loved life, no matter their social class, and the ancient government used slave labor as every other ancient culture did, without regard to any particular ethnicity. The ancient Egyptians did have a well-known contempt for non-Egyptians, but this was simply because they believed they were living the best life possible in the best of all possible worlds. Life in ancient Egypt was considered so perfect, in fact, that the Egyptian afterlife was imagined as an eternal continuation of life on earth. The individuals who actually built the pyramids and other famous monuments of Egypt were Egyptians, who were compensated for their labor and in many cases were masters of their art. These monuments were raised not in honor of death, but of life, and the belief that an individual life mattered enough to be remembered for eternity. Further, the Egyptian believed that one's life was an eternal journey, and this only a transition inspired the people to try to make their lives worth living eternally, far from a death-obsessed and dour culture. Egyptian daily life was focused on enjoying the time one had as much as possible and trying to make other life equally memorable. The population of Egypt was strictly divided into social classes, from the king at the top, his vizier, the members of his court, regional governors, the generals of the military, government overseers of work sites, and the peasantry. Social mobility was neither encouraged nor observed for most of Egypt's history, as it was thought that the gods had decreed the most perfect social order which mirrored that of the gods. The gods had given the people everything and had set the king over them as the one best equipped to understand and implement their will. The king was the intermediary between the gods and the people, from the pre-dynastic period through the Old Kingdom, when the priests of the sun god Ra began to gain more power. Even the later part of the New Kingdom, when the priests of Amun and the Thebes held greater power than the king. Military prior to the Middle Kingdom was made up of regional milities, conscripted by nomarchs for a certain purpose, usually defense, and then sent to the king. At the beginning of the 12th dynasty of the Middle Kingdom, Amenemhat I reformed the military to create the first standing army, thus decreasing the power and the prestige of the nomarchs and putting the army directly under his control. But pharaohs like Thutmose III and Ramesses II led campaigns beyond Egypt's borders in expanding the empire. Egyptians generally avoided travel to other lands because they feared that if they should die there, they would have greater difficulty reaching the afterlife. This belief was a definite concern of soldiers on foreign campaigns, and the provisions were made to return the bodies of the dead to Egypt for burial. The lowest social class was made up of peasant farmers who did not own the land they worked or the homes they lived in. The land was owned by the king, members of the court, nomarchs, or priests. A common phrase of the peasants to start the day was, "Let us work for the noble." The peasants were almost all farmers, no matter what other trades they cultivated. They planted and harvested their crops, gave most of it to the landowner, and kept some for themselves. Homes and furnishings. These artists were responsible for creating the furnishing for the lavish palaces, upper class homes, and temples of Egypt, as well as the tombs, which were considered a person's eternal home. The king, his queen, and family lived in a palace, which was richly decorated, and had their needs tended to by servants. Scribes lived in or near the mortuary or temple complexes in a special apartment and worked from scriptoriums, while as noted nomarchs lived in greater or lesser accommodation according to their level of class. Crime and punishment. In ancient Egypt, as in every era of human history, the wealth of one person was often coveted by another who might choose to steal it, and in such cases, Egyptian law was swift. After the New Kingdom, there was a police force, but even before this time, people were brought before the local official and charged with crimes ranging across the spectrum of criminal activity in the modern day. The state did not involve itself in local affairs unless the criminal had robbed or vandalized state property, such as robbing or defacing a tomb. Festivals, food, and clothing. All of the Egyptian gods had birthdays, which needed to be celebrated, and then there were individual birthdays, the anniversaries of great deeds of the king, observance of acts of the gods in human history, and also funerals, wakes, housewarming events, and births. All of these and more were celebrated with a party or a festival.